This was a bad idea, letting Jungkook upstairs, attempting to dom him, acting like this whole thing was completely normal when it was probably going to Taehyung head for the next 3 weeks. But he didn't care. Jungkook needed this. And Taehyung couldn't deny it anymore. He needed this too. He needed to take care of Jungkook and focus on someone else's feelings instead of his own. He needed to try to reach down and pull out the dominant side of him to dampen the pain that had been gnawing into him for so long. He needed a night where he didn't go to bed with a pounding in his skull from crying. Maybe this time, he could pass out with Jungkook wrapped around him, and with each drag of smoke, Taehyung found himself sinking deeper into the place he wanted to be. His headspace slowly building to one of assertiveness and confidence, a mindset that he knew was strong and could stuff down the emotions that had been toying with him all night. Rhythmic whimpers were now coming from the bedroom, causing Taehyung's stomach to jump as he tossed his cigarette butt in the sink. He couldn't wait until he was the reason for the sounds Jungkook was making. He returned to Jungkook to find the boy. His eyes were closed, and his lips were parted, moans and breaths alternating as they escaped him. It was then that Taehyung realized that he didn't get to finish changing the blankets, but Jungkook seemed too gone to care. "Well," Taehyung said, causing Jungkook's eyes to shoot open, as if he hadn't realized Taehyung was there. "If that isn't the sight I've seen in a while." Jungkook's eyes fluttered slightly, still continuing to work. "He's gonna make your sick?" Taehyung asked with raised eyebrows as he folded his arms. Jungkook finally stopped panting as he looked up at Taehyung. Want you to make me, sir?" he said breathlessly, trying to shake away locks of hair that were sticking to his forehead with sweat. "Oh, really?" Taehyung said. "Looked like you were close, even." Jungkook shook his head. "No," he breathed, "nowhere near close, I promise." "I waited for you," Taehyung hummed. Jungkook straightened out and rolled over onto his side to face Taehyung. Taehyung swallowed hard as he realized how much of a position this was. The two of them lying in bed together, side by side and eyes locked, as they had done hundreds of times before. It was something he was so familiar with, and yet, the striking contrast of how it used to be and how it was now had an awkwardness weaving through his ribs. His hands twitched as he tried to ignore the muscle memory of pulling Jungkook in for a deep kiss, one that asserted his dominance and reassured that he was there. He would take control, he would take care of Jungkook. But it had always meant more than that. Each kiss they shared in the few moments before their bodies connected had always been filled with love and fondness and things Taehyung knew that he shouldn't feel right now for the boy that wasn't his. He pulled his gaze away from Jungkook's face, eyes falling to the boy. This was a better feeling, the feeling of eagerness and pending adrenaline and a purpose. Suddenly Jungkook's hand was on Taehyung's wrist, pulling his fingers out of his mouth and leaning in. Taehyung panicked, his heart suddenly quickening in his chest. It hadn't occurred to him that if he didn't kiss Jungkook, Jungkook might choose to initiate the kiss instead. How was Taehyung supposed to reject the boy like that? He knew Jungkook. He knew what his sub needed and how he tended to get in times like these, and a rejected kiss would probably send him spiraling. Taehyung didn't want that. No matter how many ill feelings he had towards his ex-boyfriend, Taehyung would never wish emotional turmoil on him. To Taehyung's surprise, Jungkook didn't close the space between their mouths as he came closer to Taehyung's face. He looked up coyly at Taehyung as he slowly pulled off, the ghost of red left on his lips dragging along Taehyung's knuckles in such a way that had Taehyung inhaling shakily. "Daddy," Jungkook murmured salaciously, batting his eyelashes and nipping at the tips of Taehyung's fingers. Taehyung chuckled, grabbing Jungkook by the chin and narrowing his eyes slightly. "You're done getting to decide what I do to you, pet," he said darkly, swiping his thumb over Jungkook's bottom lip. Jungkook looked up, his lip between his teeth and brow furrowed. "We need it," Taehyung said, the word feeling like steel wool as it broke through his lips. Taehyung couldn't even remember the last time they had you. Hell, he didn't even know if they had any. But with the two of them being broken up for at least 2 months, he didn't know where Jungkook had been, who Jungkook had been with. The thought made a wave of nausea roll through his stomach. Jungkook's eyes were all over Taehyung's face, as if trying to gauge whether Taehyung was serious. "Are you not clean?" the boy asked, voice small. "What?" Taehyung said, the question genuinely surprising him. "No, God no. I didn't. I haven't slept with anybody," Jungkook interrupted, face serious and slightly hardened. "Me neither," Taehyung blurted out defensively. "All right," Jungkook said, narrowing his eyes so slightly that Taehyung thought he might be making it up. "I didn't," he emphasized, trying not to sound like he was trying to convince Jungkook of a lie. "I wouldn't dream of it. I wouldn't cheat on you like that." Taehyung shut his mouth as he realized what he had said. By the way that Jungkook was suddenly pressing his lips together, Taehyung could tell that Jungkook had realized it too. "I didn't mean, we can use," Jungkook said, shaking his head as if he didn't want to hear Taehyung say anything else. "Just quickly please." Taehyung squeezed his eyes shut and tried to ignore the embarrassment and heartbreak that was pressed against his throat. He couldn't have cheated on Jungkook because Jungkook wasn't his boyfriend. Anything that could have happened between him and someone else, or between Jungkook and someone else, would have been fair game. Taehyung hated this. He nodded in response to Jungkook's request, agreeing that the sooner they got on with things the better. He gently guided Jungkook back to the bed and turned over to the nightstand. "Oh," Jungkook choked out a sob, eyes closed as his hair fell into his face. "Daddy," he whimpered, voice shaky as he let himself be railed again and again. "Oh, poor little kitten," Taehyung mocked, voice exaggerated. "You gonna cry for me, Cookie? Gonna show me what a tearful little baby you can?" "Good boy daddy, please," Jungkook whined as he ran his fingers through his hair and revealed that his eyes were wet around the edges. "You're so bad for me, pet," Taehyung murmured. More please," Jungkook panted, sounding desperate as he begged for it. "Tell me why I'm bad." Taehyung's eyes closed slightly and his breath stuttered as he felt Jungkook tighten around him. You're bad for demanding so much," Taehyung continued, squeezing his eyes shut completely so he didn't have to see the way Jungkook's Adam's apple was jutting out under his stubble. "So bad, Daddy," Jungkook whispered, quietly enough that Taehyung almost didn't hear it over the ringing that was starting in his ears. "So bad, Cookie, you're so bad for Beau, bad for showing up on the front steps and crying for it, bad for..." Taehyung's words cut off with a choked breath that he tried to tell himself wasn't the beginnings of a sob, his backside falling to the bed. His mind was racing with all of the things he wanted to say, words he wished he could spit at Jungkook until the boy was crying for an entirely new reason. "You're bad for coming here like nothing's wrong. You're bad for leaving in the first place. You're bad for destroying what we had and disappearing and making me wonder if I'd ever even see you again." Taehyung shakily lifted an arm and flung it over his eyes, breathing harshly through his mouth as he tried to force the tears back inside of himself. It was too much. It was too much. The whole night had been too much. the text on his phone and the knocks on the door and Jungkook on his knees. Jungkook begging, crying. Taehyung could hardly feel his body, only wait. Daddy, I'm so. Taehyung forced his arm off of his face. You gonna make a mess like a bad boy. Taehyung started to jerk Jungkook off, taking deep breaths as he attempted to fall back into the moment. Yes, yes, please Jungkook, Taehyung gasped, back arching slightly at the feeling. Missed this, Daddy, missed it, missed you too, baby. Taehyung breathed before he could stop the words from spilling out. He tried to ignore them, focusing on climax that was slowly building. Missed you so much, Jungkook cried out, his gasps turning to sobs as he fell forward with his hands on Taehyung's shoulders. Shh, relax kitten, you're okay, it's okay. While those were the words that Taehyung had so often used to comfort Jungkook, this time, Taehyung didn't know if they were true. He didn't know if things were okay, not with Jungkook, not with himself, not between them. He didn't know if they were okay in that moment or if they would ever be okay again. Jungkook stiffened at nearly the exact same moment, breath suddenly coming even more harshly. Please, I need. Suddenly Taehyung didn't care how bad things were, how confusing the night had been, or what was going to happen after everything was finished. All he cared about was his boy, wanting to drown in both of them like they were all he'd ever need. Jungkook's moan suddenly turned into sobs, fingernails digging into Taehyung's shoulders as he buried his face in Taehyung's neck. I'm sorry, he choked out, coughing around the words and cries. I'm so sorry. Taehyung wrapped his arms around Jungkook tightly, rubbing his back and trying to sit them up. Baby, you're okay. You did so good, honey. Breathe for me. Jungkook trembled as Taehyung could feel him attempting to take deep breaths, his chest rising and falling in little bursts that gradually became more drawn out. Good, that's good, love, Taehyung soothed, stroking Jungkook's hair and smoothing it out of the way. For everything that had happened, all the days spent apart and the nights spent alone, Taehyung couldn't believe how comfortably Jungkook still fit in his arms, how easily he was able to jump right into aftercare as if nothing was different between the two of them. Maybe nothing was. Maybe that breakup had just been a speed bump, and everything would go back to the way that it had been, the way that it should be. He didn't know how, but Taehyung decided not to worry about that at the moment. He had his boy back in his arms, and that was enough to comfort him and bring him peace. Jungkook was silent and still for several minutes, his breathing having evened out and his face drying up where it was still pressed to the older man's skin. Jungkook shifted slightly and then spoke up. Sorry, was all that he mumbled into Taehyung's flesh, twitching almost as soon as he said the words. Taehyung shushed before kissing Jungkook's forehead. He leaned forward to grab the blankets and then laid himself and Jungkook down, pulling the covers over them and letting Jungkook snuggle into him further. You'll be okay. We can talk tomorrow. I love you, Cookie. I love you too, Taehyung.